All right, what's going on, guys? Brocco here with Uncharted Territory. Welcome back to the post-market recap series. Hope everyone had a great day today. It is Monday, December 8th. We got about a half hour till market close. Probably going to be a pretty short video today, maybe, 7, 8 minutes. I feel like I don't have much to talk about in terms of what took place today. Pretty uneventful day, in my opinion. Market pulled back a little bit. We got the S&P down about 0.5%, NASDAQ down about 0.5% as well. We came up into this bearish gap on Friday, where we had this big first down day off the highs at the end of October. We pushed out into that gap on Friday. We also tried to push out of this little tight rising channel we traded in for 4 or 5 days, came back in, closed well off the highs, and then we, sort of gapped up today, right over that trend line and into that bearish gap again, and then just got sold into and slowly faded off the rest of the day. There were a few signals on Friday that, market might be close to a point where we want to pull back and rest a little bit. I sent out a message, I think early in the morning on Friday that, guys, we got the QQQ up 9% in like 8 days. And, we're up into these bearish gaps from where this sell-off initially took place, a pretty logical area to, find some resistance, especially when we're stretched to the upside in the short term. And not to mention, one of the most obvious signals when you get a V-shaped recovery like this is just the VIX coming down into this 15 area. I think I made a comment a week or two ago that they're probably going to walk the VIX down to 15, and that was based off, the precedent from December of last year where we had the first sell-off off the highs. Anytime you get, a high VIX to come down really quickly into like the low 15s, typically pretty logical area to see a quick and sharp bounce back up. And, now if this pops up and then lower highs and comes back down, you can see it chop around 15 for a long period of time like we did in August and September and stuff like that. So, I have no clue what it's going to do from here, but just with the indexes stretched into that bearish gap and overshooting some, channels on Friday, as well as the VIX back into this 15 area, felt like a logical area to, just be like, hey, probably not the best spot to be adding tons of new risk to the portfolio. Market is always going to start pulling back off a rally like this when it almost feels like the market's never going to pull back again. And when we had that rip on the Qs on Friday, it certainly felt like that for a minute. And then, early morning buyers got a little too excited. Sellers stepped in and we're starting to pull back a little bit today. So I wouldn't say anything super aggressive to the sell side today. Just feels like market's a little exhausted or maybe a little cautious ahead of the Fed meeting with this big run up and whatever. Don't need to look into it too much, but this is a good sign, right? The higher the market goes without any rest, the harder that first pullback is going to be. So, glad to see us, selling off a bit here, and hopefully it can last a couple more days, maybe even a couple weeks, to be honest. I might be one of the only ones in that camp where I would actually love to see the indexes put in one more contraction on this weekly chart, whether it be to like the low 600 on QQQ, maybe undercut last week's lows at some point and just build out this kind of second higher low channel that we can push out of. And then we have a bigger base that can provide maybe a much more prolonged and sustained healthy move to the upside, right? So I have no clue if that's going to happen. I'd love it to. I love these corrections when you get like a first wave down and then a second wave that is almost a little scary in the moment and a little harsh. And it really scares some people out and, traps some shorts. And that's where you can get those really big squeezes back higher, almost like September of last year, where the market had this kind of second pullback after the initial correction and kind of faked out. And then we had that big ripper. So something I'm keeping in mind, going into the rest of the week and stuff like that. IWM did make all-time highs this morning in the pre-market. We saw RSP, the S&P equal-weighted ETF, make all-time highs on Friday, as well as SOXX, which is the equal-weighted semiconductor ETF, which actually made new all-time highs before the SMH did, which is more heavily weighted towards, NVIDIA and stuff like that. So, IWM did make all-time highs in the pre-market. It bearish engulfed just by a few cents for, briefly today. So I would love to see this rest here for a little bit, whether it be a couple days or a couple weeks, have this big all-time high breakout set up. Certainly been the strongest ETF off the lows of this correction. Super nice action here. Not surprised if it, wants to rest a little bit. Yeah, XLV pulled back a little bit as well today, down 1.3%. This has been kind of like one of those leading groups over the last 2 or 3 months. And XBI just continuing to just trend. I mean, this is incredible. I think in like all my scans, more than half the stocks are just these biotechs exploding. And unfortunately, I don't feel I'm not very versed in kind of the biotech world. I don't feel I know enough about the companies or any of the catalysts them come through and make it really hard for me to get any conviction in any of them. But for anyone who is big in the biotech space or has been involved, I mean, this is just an incredibly like outlier year, and certainly could put up some big returns trading these. So unfortunately not in my playbook, but awesome to see for anyone who does like trading those. And then we got crypto. Crypto's really interesting. So I think these are setting up for a little bit of a decision into the Fed meeting, most likely in the couple days after the Fed meeting. But, you got this kind of first base building after this big kind of, stage 4 breakdown out of this big distribution. And, a lot of people looking at this as a bear flag, or some people looking at it as higher lows. Just mid-range right now, it's really hard to tell. I can't say that I have a very strong opinion on this. I am excited to see how it plays out and maybe potentially going to look for a trade on the other side of that. But we are at a really interesting spot. You have this, the SBIT, which is the inverse short Bitcoin ETF, kind of pulling back to the support and getting really tight. Even like MSTZ, which is the inverse ETF for MSTR, like super, super tight. I deleted this candle earlier on Zoom, but yeah, really tight pattern here. Obviously MSTR had like tons of volume last week, traded like 140 million shares. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Maybe not even as far as like participating in it, but just from being like a market speculator, I'm excited to see how like this whole situation plays out. So, going to keep eyes in the, on crypto, how that acts around the Fed meeting as well. SMH, we talked about this a little bit today, but, kind of call it back to the scene of the crime, if you will, or back into this area where, it had topped out back in October. And, just an insane move off the lows. Really hard to think this isn't going to pull back or at least consolidate here for a little bit given this recent move. Volumes just kind of like fell off a cliff lately, which, you don't need a lot of volume to push up off the lows. But once you get, make a decent move and run back into these previous highs, you're going to need to see some more volume if you're going to get like a sustained move higher. So, I'm in the camp that this is going to pull back or consolidate a little bit before going any higher. NVIDIA also was pretty interesting today. NVIDIA had that headline today with on I think the US is allowing NVIDIA's H200 chip to export to China or whatever. And, this kind of, popped out of the range today and came back through just kind of all over the place today. Tough to call it a news failure really when it is, up, 1.5% on the day. It's stronger than the NASDAQ. So tough to call it a news failure. Market didn't really get much pop off of that headline, which it seemed like it was a pretty big deal in the moment. But I think what's more important is going to be how this kind of resolves in the next few days. Hard to not be a little bit concerned about this NVIDIA as it had that big earnings failure. It's, consecutive lower highs, and SMH pretty much had like 9 green days in a row. SOXX made all-time highs, and this NVIDIA is still, making lower highs, and just can't seem to catch a break. So, what happens if this SMH, pulls back into this like 350 area in the coming days or weeks? What is this NVIDIA going to do, right? Maybe it can hold up. I find that hard to believe given how it's acted, over the last week or two, but we'll have to see. Not really a chart that I feel I can get an edge in right now. Personally, it's just kind of in a big range. So I'm just kind of more monitoring it for, market health purposes and whatnot. So, but yeah, I mean, last week, the big theme was a lot of, those stocks that got beaten down in the corrections. They're in the recent correction, just, big moves off the lows, right? You even saw the short interest basket last week, like your quantums like IONQ and RGTI making a move off the lows, even some stuff like OKLO, SMR, NNE, CoreWeave, stuff like that. So now the real tell is going to be, okay, now do we, consolidate for a couple days? Do we hold rising moving averages and then get a second leg up? So the big tell is going to be, what names kind of separate themselves from the pack this week as far as, if the market does pull back, what names hold up the best? Stuff like Rocket Lab and ASTS making big 3 to 4 day moves. Okay, now we want to see these consolidate, build out a new base, and start to set up and get tight again. Could take days, could take weeks, don't really know. As far as my watch list going into the rest of the week, and this isn't like a super focused list, like, I'm ready to buy tomorrow, but just names I'm kind of, tracking for now. CRDO is one of them, had this earnings gap up, pulled back, filled the earnings gap, putting in a nice hammer candle today. RR, this robotics theme got moving last week. This is more of one of your like high beta, maybe momentum names. Don't know much about the fundamentals, but obviously this had a big drawdown off the highs, traded a lot of volume at the highs, but it did get pretty big volume on this recent 2-day move up, which to me tells me this could have some fuel to it. This is your classic, just like momentum burst, get tight, set up again, and then you play the continuation of that. So if we can get a couple days here of tight action, and the market sets up and behaves, I think this could be a pretty solid candidate for a second leg higher if that robotics theme kind of sticks. CIFR, I bought this morning, got stopped out, rebought it back off the lows here as it curled back up. Really nice chart. I mean, this is its first base after a multi-year base breakout, 300% move on massive volume. Really hard to ignore this. I know a lot of people are watching it, but it's getting tight here. I got to stop at yesterday's low right now, so pretty small position, nothing crazy. But the hope is that this moves back up to the highs and gets tight and gives another setup when the environment maybe improves or gets a little better. We just have some more evidence that the market wants to continue to make a sustained move higher. So CIFR on the list, and another big reason this is on watch is because you kind of have the group strength as well, with WULF setting up pretty much identical, and HUT as well setting up a pretty similar pattern. So these three have kind of separated themselves from the pack within that group, and Cypher is kind of my main name just because it's it's liquid, high ADR. It trended the smoothest in the first leg up in my opinion. So that's why I'm interested in this one. PL, another name, they have earnings this week. I'll be watching this. Another name, with the first all-time high base setting up, has made monster moves on the last two earnings reports. So really interested to see how this one acts, especially given the fact that, if we are coming out of a correction and we are going to make another sustained move higher on the NASDAQ, typically some of the best performing stocks in the first half of the rally are the stocks that, gap up or make moves higher on earnings and sustain those moves as the index come out of correction. So really interested to see how that acts on the report. BE, another one as well. Another one kind of in that like Cypher basket for me. Just trended really smoothly, came back, capitulated here, undercut the left side of this base. This 120 spot's probably going to be the trigger. Got hit a little bit today. Fine with that. No position right now, but if this can build out a little bit more below this 120 spot, I'll be super interested in this. EOSC as well, another one, that we got a common theme here of these names that, didn't get hit so hard during the correction, really like undercutting the left side of their bases and coming back up through, which can provide some pretty powerful moves if they do set up and get follow through. So really interested in these. This EOSC's putting in a nice hammer today as well. This is going to be in focus. And then Tesla as well. This is kind of just a bigger picture idea into the end of the year. Chart's not tight, came up into this trend line, got hit pretty hard today. No setup there yet, not tight enough, needs to find some higher lows and build out a little bit more. But this weekly chart with this, big all-time high breakout setup, it's gone sideways for multiple months now, retested and undercut the 2021 high in the recent pullback, and was really resilient off these lows. So going to watch this for a setup in the future. It's not ready yet, but I just really don't want to lose sight of it, so it's on the list for me. So that's my watch list going into the rest of the week. Don't really have any big thoughts on the Fed meeting Wednesday. Maybe there's a good chance market doesn't do much ahead of that meeting. I wouldn't be surprised. Usually that is the case, but not scared of the meeting or anything. And just going to let things happen and let the charts do the talking. But I am pretty excited for how. With how big my watch list has gotten and how filled my scans have got, it is pretty exciting time if we can get some more pullback, some consolidation, and some things to set up again. I still see a lot of people in disbelief, in doubt of the market. So that typically can provide some continued sustained moves. So something to be mindful of. But we'll see you guys back tomorrow at market close for the post-market recap. That's it for today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the week.